We are glad to welcome you, friends, to the Elderly Counsel channel. And today we will talk about such an important topic as loneliness, what it is and what to do about it. And before that, don't forget to leave a comment so that we can improve the content for you and publish videos on the topics that interest you. Let's not drag on, let's improve your life. Loneliness doesn't begin with a loud alarm bell. It starts quietly. Perhaps with a skipped phone call, a lost friend, a family visit that doesn't happen. Slowly, routines change. The voice inside your head becomes your main conversation partner. You start to go days without speaking to anyone. And although it feels normal at first, the body and brain begin to react. You see, the human brain is a social organ. We're wired for connection. Our ancestors survived not by strength, but by sticking together. So when we isolate ourselves, whether by choice or by circumstance, our nervous system interprets it as a threat. Cortisol, the stress hormone, begins to rise. Sleep becomes lighter, more fragmented. The immune system becomes less efficient. This isn't just emotional discomfort, it's a physiological reaction to a lack of human connection. Research shows that chronic loneliness can increase the risk of cognitive decline, depression, high blood pressure, and even heart disease. One study from the University of Chicago found that loneliness can be as harmful to health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's a staggering thought. And yet, millions of older adults are living in this state every day. It's important to distinguish solitude from loneliness. Solitude can be beautiful, nourishing, even. But loneliness is when solitude becomes chronic, unwanted, and emotionally painful. It affects the way we think, the way we move, even the way we digest food. Over time, loneliness can create what I call the loop. The less connected you feel, the less energy you have to reach out. The less you reach out, the more isolated you become. It's a downward spiral that feeds itself. I've met people who say, "I'm just not a people person," but often, that's a protective shell. We get used to being alone, and the idea of opening up again feels exhausting. Or worse, pointless. We say to ourselves, what's the use? But here's the truth, even a small shift can begin to heal that loop. You don't need to be the life of the party. You don't even need a dozen friends. What you need is meaningful connection, even if it starts with one person, or one small gesture a day. So how do we begin? First, by recognizing the signs. If you feel more tired than usual, if your motivation to take care of yourself is slipping, if you find yourself talking to the walls or forgetting the last time someone touched your hand, these are not just quirks. These are signals. And the answer isn't always waiting for someone to come to you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is take one step outward, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Not for the sake of being busy, but for the sake of being seen. In the next part of our story, I'll tell you what steps helped me, and others like me, begin to rebuild a sense of connection. Even in a quiet home. Even without nearby family. Because this isn't about filling space with noise. It's about reconnecting with the world in a way that restores your mind, your body, and your sense of being alive. Stay with me. We're just getting started. Breaking the loop. I didn't break the loneliness loop with a grand gesture. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden epiphany. It started with something much smaller, an old neighbor waving at me from across the street. At first, I just nodded and kept walking. I wasn't in the mood to talk. But the next time I saw her, I waved back. Then one day, I said hello. The next, we spoke about the weather. And a few weeks later, we sat together on her porch for tea. That's how it begins. Connection doesn't need fireworks. It needs consistency. Small threads, gently woven over time, can stitch back together what isolation has quietly unraveled. When I talk to people who live alone and feel that ache of absence, of touch, of voice, of simple presence, I often hear the same question: where do I even start? So here's what I've learned, both from my own life and from conversations with doctors, therapists, and fellow elders who've walked this road. 1. Begin with routine, not relationships. You don't need a dozen friends to feel better. What you need first is rhythm. Loneliness often disrupts your daily structure. Without someone to plan meals with, to speak to in the mornings, or even to remind you that it's time to go outside, the days blur. But the body, and the brain, love rhythm. When we create predictable patterns, our nervous system calms. Cortisol drops. Sleep improves. Blood pressure steadies. Start by anchoring your day with 3 fixed points: a wake-up ritual, a midday habit, and an evening wind-down. For example, morning, play soft music as you make breakfast. Speak out loud, read the news, recite a poem, or just greet the morning. Midday, take a short walk at the same time each day, even if it's just around the house. Wave at neighbors, notice the trees, feel the air. Evening, write a sentence or 2 in a notebook. What did you notice today? What made you feel something? It sounds simple, almost too simple, but structure gives you a sense of movement. And movement, even in tiny forms, breaks stagnation. 2. Seek micro-connections. Not everyone has family nearby. Many have lost spouses or close friends. But that doesn't mean meaningful interaction is out of reach. Modern science shows that even brief social contact, just a few kind words exchanged with a cashier, a bus driver, or a neighbor, can release oxytocin, the hormone of trust and calm. It helps the body shift from fight or flight into rest and repair. In other words, connection heals. Here are some places to look for micro-connections. The post office. Ask how someone's day is going. A local library. Many have free senior events. The grocery store. Go when it's less busy and take time to chat with staff. Walking routes. Smile at the same dog walkers each day. Eventually, smiles turn into conversations. This is not about making best friends. This is about reminding your brain that you're part of the world, and the world still sees you. 3. Use technology as a tool, not a crutch. Now, I'll admit, technology can feel intimidating. But when used gently, it can offer a lifeline. Video calls with distant family, joining an online group, even watching educational videos made for older adults can reduce feelings of isolation. I met a man who started commenting on cooking videos just to have someone reply. Those little exchanges made him feel part of something. Start with one platform. Ask a younger relative or neighbor to help set it up. Keep it simple: email, video chats, or YouTube channels like Elderly Wisdom or Life Advice for You can be surprisingly comforting. But a word of caution: don't let digital connection replace physical presence. Nothing replaces a warm voice in the room. The screen is a bridge, but the goal is still real-world engagement. 4. Rebuild the muscle of social confidence. Living alone for a long time can make us forget how to speak freely with others. We lose the rhythm of conversation, and with it, the confidence to join in. The good news is, this is just a muscle, and it can be trained. Try this small challenge: each week, say something kind or curious to 3 people. It can be as short as, "That's a beautiful scarf," or "What a sweet dog." These tiny offerings are social invitations, and most people welcome them warmly. Social confidence isn't about being extroverted. It's about knowing that your voice matters. And every time you use it, it gets stronger. 5. Reconnect with purpose. One of the most devastating parts of loneliness is the feeling that you're no longer needed. But I want to remind you, your presence, your wisdom, your time, they matter. Consider volunteering just once a month. Call a hospital, library, or animal shelter. Many will be delighted to have your help, especially with storytelling, letter writing, or simply offering companionship. Purpose gives the brain direction. It literally lights up areas associated with reward and motivation. By the time I finished my 3rd tea visit with my neighbor, something remarkable had shifted. Not in the world, but in me. I stood a little taller. I planned my meals again. I stopped skipping my afternoon walks. That's the thing about loneliness, it's sticky. But connection? Connection is contagious, too. In the final part of our story, we'll explore what to do when you've started to reconnect, but still have bad days. Because they come. And when they do, it's not about avoiding them, it's about knowing how to move through them, gently and wisely. Stay with me. We're not done yet. Walking through the quiet. Even after I began to reconnect, with my neighbor, with my routines, with the rhythm of living, there were still days when the quiet returned. And not the peaceful, comforting kind of quiet. This was the quiet that presses in around the edges of the day. The kind that reminds you of who's no longer at the table. The kind that whispers, you're still alone, even when you're doing everything right. And I want to tell you something honestly, that's normal. Loneliness doesn't vanish in a single moment. It rises and falls like the tide. Some days, the sun is out and the world feels full again. Other days, the clouds return. The chairs feel too empty. And the effort it takes to get dressed, to eat, to reach out, it feels like climbing a hill with no summit. So, what do we do with those days? We walk through them, gently, and with a plan. Let me show you how. 1. Create a bad day box. Not a literal box, though it can be. What I mean is this: have a prepared routine you turn to when the heavy quiet sets in. Because on those days, it's hard to think clearly. The voice in your head may get darker. You might feel tempted to retreat completely, to skip meals, to ignore phone calls. So instead, create a template for yourself. Write it down and keep it where you'll see it. Here's what mine looks like. Step 1, open the window. Breathe for 3 minutes. Fresh air helps reset the nervous system. Step 2, drink something warm. Herbal tea or broth. Warmth soothes both body and spirit. Step 3, turn on music, not sad music, not silence. Something steady. Something old and familiar. Step 4, call or message one person. Even if they don't respond. Reaching out is enough. Step 5, do one task with your hands: chop vegetables, fold laundry, repot a plant. Movement grounds the mind. These small acts may not fix the loneliness, but they prevent it from turning into despair. They keep you upright, engaged, breathing. And that's the first step toward healing. 2. Name what you're feeling, without shame. One of the most dangerous lies we tell ourselves is, I shouldn't feel this way. I have food, a roof, my health, I should be fine. But emotional pain isn't solved by guilt. It's softened by understanding. There's nothing weak about feeling lonely. It doesn't mean you've failed. It doesn't mean you're ungrateful. It means you're human, and your body, your brain, your soul, are asking for contact. The moment you give yourself permission to feel what you're feeling, something changes. The tension releases. Your breath deepens. You become less afraid of your own emotions. And with that acceptance comes clarity. You stop fighting the feeling and start listening to it. Ask yourself, what do I need right now? Not forever. Just in this moment. Sometimes, the answer is rest. Sometimes, it's laughter. Sometimes, it's a hug, even if it's one you give yourself. 3. Reaffirm your identity beyond loneliness. It's easy, after living alone for many years, to begin defining yourself by what you lack. But you are not your solitude. You are not your grief. You are not a burden, a background figure, or someone whose best years are behind them. You are a living archive of stories, wisdom, and strength. When I started volunteering at the community library, I met a retired teacher named Ruth. She lived alone, had no children, and rarely left her house. But once a week, she'd come in to read to children during story hour. At first, she said it was just something to do. But I saw what it became. Those children adored her. She had this quiet way of making each one feel seen. By month 3, she was baking cookies for them. By month 6, she was glowing. She once told me, "I thought I was invisible. But I was just unseen." Sometimes, all it takes is one place to show up where you're valued for who you are, not just who you were. That's how we rebuild identity. We place ourselves back into the story, not as a footnote, but as a character still living the next chapter. 4. Let grief be a companion, not a captor. For many of us, loneliness is tied to loss. The passing of a spouse. A sibling who no longer calls. A lifelong friend who moved away. And some wounds don't heal in a neat timeline. But grief, too, can walk beside us without leading us. One thing that helped me deeply was learning to talk to my grief as though it were a visitor. I'd say, "I see you. You're welcome to sit beside me, but you don't get to drive the day." Some people light candles for those they miss. Others write letters, keep memory boxes, or take walks to speak with them in silence. However you do it, make peace with grief. Let it exist, but don't let it steal your ability to build something new. The heart is remarkably resilient. It breaks, yes. But it also stretches. 5. Don't wait to be invited, extend the invitation. One of the most radical things I've learned is this: connection grows fastest when you initiate it. Even if your circle is small, even if you've been disappointed before. Invite someone for tea. Offer to teach a neighbor how to knit. Join a walking group or book club. Post a note on the community board offering free conversation over coffee. It's not easy at first. You may feel exposed. But vulnerability is not weakness. It's the bridge that makes real connection possible. The world is full of people craving kindness. Sometimes, they're just waiting for someone else to go first. Let it be you. And so, here we are. Loneliness is real. It's heavy. But it's not permanent. You can soften it. You can reshape your days. You can rebuild your sense of belonging, not by waiting for life to return to you, but by slowly, bravely returning to life. And if no one's told you this today, let me be the first: you are still needed, still valuable, and still beautifully alive. Keep walking. Even through the quiet. Especially through the quiet. That's where healing begins. Thank you for watching this video to the end, and we hope that these tips will help you. We would be grateful if you leave a like and comment under this video so that we can improve the content and write videos on topics that interest you. We wish you health and happiness. The Elderly Council was with you.